as well as externally, with, especially for this year, Veteran Service Organization are one of our major foci. So I have been in VA for about 12 years, held a number of positions at the VISN, which is like a Veterans Healthcare regional level, as well as at the VA Pittsburgh healthcare system. So I am based in sunny, exotic Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Prior to that, I was in DoD, so I am a combat veteran. And punk rock musician on the weekends. And I don't live in an adorable cabin, but I've got punk rock, so that's a little bit of flair, and hopefully that's enough for you. Looking forward to giving you a little bit of a heads up on what we do here in the innovation ecosystem. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So y'all, before I get started, I'm curious, sort of, Mariana, Peter, John, Dale, Carla, have any of you ever heard of the VHA's innovation ecosystem? Yeah, Mariana, you published some of the RVH research. You cited our work in your own, which was very exciting.
I did. I've published it and I've taught it. I've taught my students. So Carla has read it in some lecture slides, but I'll let her speak for herself. So yeah, happy to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so stoked to hear that, because really at the end of the day, what we want to do here is build sort of better networks and coalitions, and to basically let you all become aware of, who we are and what we do, and point you towards a massive amount of our research and curiosities that we've made available outside of the VA firewall. We know that working on veterans issues is going to be everyone's job. Like, no single person or organization can do this alone. Certainly, so that's sort of why we are here. So I'm going to go ahead and get us rolling. Because we're the federal government, we of course have a big old slide deck. We'll send it to Jim to email out to everyone. This is how it goes. So what we're going to do is Matt's going to give you all sort of an overview of sort of the VHA innovation ecosystem at like the 101 super high level, before turning it over to me to talk about a specific use case, the veteran segmentation report that my team researched in 2021 that has a lot of fantastic information that you all can and could and should be pulling into your own research. It is but one artifact available for you on Pathfinder, as well as some other resources that we have. And then we're going to do our best to wrap it up quickly so we can do Q&A and open forum. So, but first, before we get into the sort of nuts and bolts of all these things, I'm the director of design and storytelling, so I wanted to start with a little tiny bit of a story, because it might end up feeling like information dump when we just tell you about all this stuff, the innovation ecosystem and all of our projects and initiatives and our goals and et cetera. Really what this comes down to is the experience of individuals going across this healthcare system, whether they are, veterans, patients, family members, or internal to the system as an employee. So my story here on, the why behind the ecosystem. Why is this even a thing? What does this do? What does it mean? I started working at VA first as a consultant in 2006. I fell in love with it quickly. My dad is an Army veteran. I'm the granddaughter of two Navy veterans, and it's personal. So I fell in love with VA. I converted to a full-time VA employee in 2008. And then for the next 10 years, I did a lot of different things trying to help, meet performance measures, do quality improvement work as a hospital administrator, and was always sort of pushing towards the future, right? How do we innovate? How do we make this even better? I wasn't interested in just improving the known. I wanted to really help drive the unknown. And there wasn't a great way to do that, quite honestly. You'd start to get these little pockets of success locally. I worked at hospitals in Vermont and in San Francisco, and we start to gain traction, but then it would just sort of just like die on the vine in one area. There wasn't a space that allowed innovative, forward-thinking, creative employees to partner with veterans, to partner with people across the enterprise to really drive the future today. So in around 2017, the innovation ecosystem was born. And what it did is it took a bunch of disparate programs that had been doing innovation sort of in these pockets. There was the VA Center for Innovation at the VA enterprise level. There was the VHA sort of idea competition or the innovation sort of thing. And they were all doing bits of innovation, but they weren't connected. And so the ecosystem sort of compiled all of those programs and then unleashed this incredible type of network across VA that allowed, frontline employee driven grassroots innovation to thrive through the VHA's Innovators Network. It started really focusing on spreading and scaling best practices through the diffusion of excellence, and then working on strategic innovation sort of at the national level, sort of top down. This is what the innovation ecosystem is here to do. It is the convener, it is the catalyst, it is the connector, that connective tissue across the organization that really helps provide that fuel for frontline employees to partner with their patients, their family members, and fellow employees to drive the future today. This is why we're here. This is what we do. It has been amazing being a part of this team. I've been with them formally since 2018, informally since 2016. So just a little bit about what it looks like personally. Now I'm going to turn it over to Matt to give you a little deep dive into the ecosystem.
Thanks, Brynn. Yeah, so like Brynn said, the role of the innovation ecosystem is really to help build capacity among VHA's workforce, and then to potentially identify and grow innovations that come out of our workforce using our operational model, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But we've got just a few slides on that. Thanks for the slide push there, Brynn. Just a few slides on this, and then we'll get to the segmentation report, which I know many of you are excited to hear about. So here is an org chart, and this is just to give you the rundown. We fall under, I should say, the innovation ecosystem falls under the VHA Office of Healthcare Innovation and Learning. There it is, nice. We make a great team, Brynn, which is subordinate to the Undersecretary for Health for Discovery, Education, and Affiliate Networks. And for context, we call this the Dean, right? The Undersecretary for Health, Dean, Discovery, Education, and Affiliate Networks. Also subordinate to Dean is VA Research, as well as the Office of Academic Affiliations. So potentially some fantastic dynamics at play there, being so close to those other parts of our organization. So I should say under the Office of Healthcare Innovation and Learning, yes, thanks, Brynn. Under OHIL, we call it Office of Healthcare Innovation and Learning, we have the innovation ecosystem, which we'll talk about more here in a minute. We have SimLearn, which is like our simulation center, if you will. Headquarters is in Orlando, Florida. We also have the Center for Care and Payment Innovation. So they are focused on how VA can transform to a value-based care model, so that we are, administering payment and collecting payment based not necessarily on a number of, I should say, the number or the type of, instances of care, but rather the value that is derived from that care. And then, of course, the newest member of OHIL is called the Office of Advanced Manufacturing, which is included but not limited to VHA's efforts with 3D printing. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there. But what we want to talk about today, really focusing on the VHA innovation ecosystem. And like I said, the innovation ecosystem particularly is focused on growing innovation muscle and innovation culture, so that we are best prepared, not just in one or two medical centers, but across the enterprise, that we are best prepared to be growing innovations here within VHA, testing and scaling them. And so you can see those three subordinate organizations there: VHA Innovators Network, which is a group of, I think I talk about this in a latter slide, so maybe I'll save that, but it's basically our VA medical centers, where we have facility level programs to teach staff and to identify projects and grow and scale those projects. Diffusion of excellence takes it a step further and looks at more how do we scale these projects regionally, potentially nationally, and then we have strategic programs, which are that part of our portfolio, which is in line with the Undersecretary for Health's priorities in particular. Next slide, please. Thanks, Brynn. So just talking briefly about the model here, and I alluded to this at the previous slide. We use discover, test, replicate, and scale. So, we're utilizing design thinking, human-centered design principles here, contextual inquiry, those sorts of things when we do, interviews with staff, with veterans, et cetera. when we are, as it says here, empathetic interviewing drives problem and opportunity identification. So we're identifying what those challenges are and potentially ideating and iterating on possible solutions of that. Then, of course, once we have prototypes, we're testing that. We test those within our VA medical centers at those innovators network sites. Right now, we have 36 VA medical centers that are a part of our innovators network. Again, those 36 sites have facility level innovation programs. And actually in 2024, I believe we're going to go up to 44. So we did just add a number of other sites that'll be coming on board here soon. Excited about that. So using these innovators network sites, we are testing prototypes of potential innovations and solutions to challenges. And then those, of course, those that have proven feasible, then we're replicating and growing, testing in different environments, perhaps across more than one VA medical clinic or VA medical center. And then, as we're kind of working out the bugs there, we are scaling those projects larger and larger with the help of the diffusion of excellence portion of our VHA innovation ecosystem. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, let's talk about purpose. And I've sort of touched on this already, but 4 main elements here. As I said, we are interested first and foremost in making sure that the ground is fertile, that we are capable for this work of innovation, especially, we recognize this is of critical importance to the healthcare industry, and that can be very, very challenging to get there from the perspective of a federal bureaucracy. And so it has been our privilege to take on this work of making sure that we are training staff on innovation-related competencies. And so these are things like, design thinking, human-centered design principles, but also, entrepreneurial type skills, because as you may be aware, the challenge is not just coming up with a great idea and maybe doing a prototype, but it's convincing the right people that your idea has merit, so that it can be, tested, replicated, scaled, et cetera. So we do, again, entrepreneurial type skill sets such as problem pitching, stakeholder mapping, those sort of business case development, those sorts of things. That's all part of the curriculum that we are delivering to our frontline staff at VA medical centers. Along those lines, innovation nurturing culture. So it's not just about making sure we have a cadre of staff who are capable of doing this work, but it's about shifting this mindset to seeing innovation as being everyone's responsibility. And this is really, I think, has been a very rewarding part of this this work. I've been in my current role for about 6 months, but in the 2017 to 2020, I was the program coordinator, we call them innovation specialists, at the VA Pittsburgh healthcare system for the innovation program. So what has been tremendously rewarding work to be able to help communicate to staff, help them understand that they can provide value to our organization above and beyond the wonderful things that they do in the delivery of veteran care every day. To show people that, we understand that the experiences that they have in the care environment have given them insights that provide additional value to this organization, and that we want to invest in them and support their ideas in testing and replicating potential solutions that came from their personal and professional experiences here providing care to veterans. So really just a wonderful part of the job, and I think a very important part of what we do culturally at VHA. Talking about strategic partnerships and collaborations, we recognize, of course, that you can't make this happen without them. And we're talking not only internal to our organization, but also potentially academia, private sector, nonprofits, that sort of thing. And like I said, we've got our focus, a part of our focus for this coming year is making sure that we are making linkages with veteran service organizations. So these are, of course, you may be familiar, nonprofits that act on behalf of veterans and are particularly in touch with veterans' needs as it relates to veteran healthcare and beyond. And so, doing what we can to continue to grow those strategic partnerships and collaborations as the maturity of the program grows. And then having that resilient organizational infrastructure so that we can institutionalize innovation, having those systems, those frameworks in place, pathways for change. And we'll talk a little bit about some of one in particular that we find very valuable and we're really excited to be growing, which is a VA Pathfinder. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more about building that community of innovation. I think this is no big surprise here in the first couple of bullets. We need different perspectives in order to make sure that our innovations are the most relevant, the most effective, and certainly involving veterans in that work has been absolutely critical. Again, kind of speaking to our choice to involve veteran service organizations in our work. The other thing I want to point out too is that these communities of innovation, when you're talking about developing innovations, when you're talking about making change happen in a large bureaucracy, a lot of times connecting at the local level, engaging at the local level, it can be very effective because, like as it says here, problems are most acute, most specific there. You can get your use cases for something which potentially has a much broader impact for a large organization such as ours. And so, we're really prioritizing that engagement with the veteran service organization community, not just at the national level, but also at the local level through those facility level innovation programs at our 36, soon to be 44 Innovators Network sites. Please, next slide. Thank you. So this is just a brief on our engagement strategy. The main idea is we're going top down. So we have meetings with veteran service organizations at the national level. Recently met with the new national commander of Veterans of Foreign Wars, have met with the legislative directors from a number of other veteran service organizations as well. And our goal there is to find out what are those individuals' priorities, what are their organizations' priorities for veteran healthcare, wanting to make sure that we're taking those things into consideration when we are deciding where we will put our resources behind innovation at VHA. I just this week was in Salt Lake City to do the initial rollout of our local VSO engagement toolkit. So we're now going to have those innovation specialists from those 36 INET VA medical centers, Innovators Network VA medical centers, go out and make contact with veteran service organizations at the local level, local posts, chapters, et cetera, in hopes that they can start growing and deepening those relationships at the local level to get veterans involved in innovation efforts at the VA Medical Center, whether that's end user testing or what have you. There, wanting to make sure that we have those touch points occurring on a regular basis, and then potentially as we have those relationships develop, we're hoping to be able to leverage their communications channels to help continue to push more and more good information about the innovations that are being developed here at Veterans Health with the help of veteran service organization members. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we're going to get into the segmentation report here in just a minute. I want to foot stomp something here, and actually I'm going to put this in the chat. I think I have. Let me see if I can stick these. No. I will. I'll tell you what. After I'm done here, I'll put the links in the chat here, and I think we're also going to make sure that everyone gets these slides so you have the links that way. A couple of tools I want you to be aware of that I think will give you, I think a good understanding of some of the interesting things that are happening in VA innovation, as well as a great way to get in touch with, get connected with, potentially partner with VHA on innovation projects. So the first here is what we call the diffusion marketplace here on the left-hand side, marketplace.va.gov. This is an online repository, open internet. This is available to you right now, where you can check out some of the fantastic work that's happening in our portfolio around innovation. Search terms, you can browse different projects, etc. It'll give you a synopsis. It'll give you, in some cases, some insights on how these things are rolled out at different facilities, metrics on the impact of different projects. Just a fantastic way to see what's going on here in VA innovation. And then on the right-hand side, I do have a couple of additional slides on this, but this is called VA Pathfinder. I think Brynn's going to talk a little bit more about it as well. But the main idea is that VA Pathfinder is the front door for partnering with VA around innovation. And that partnership can look a number of different ways. This could be perhaps you're interested in learning more about VA data sets and potentially using those to to help develop an innovation. Perhaps you, have a solution that you have done some initial testing on, and you're wanting to get, a VA audience, whether that's VA staff or potentially veterans that receive care at VA to further test your innovation. Perhaps you have a product that you would like to sell to VA. That's a possibility as well, and Pathfinder would be your front door for that as well. Or maybe you're just interested in getting periodic updates on what's going on in VA innovation. Starting at Pathfinder, you can get yourself signed up for a mailing list, and you can remain in touch with us that way. So tremendous tool there. Next slide, please. I think this might be a little bit redundant based on what I just said. Yeah, so this is something where veterans can sign up for Pathfinder. And obviously, our goal here is in having a one-stop shop where submissions, you can make a submission either from academia, from public sector, from, being a vendor or what have you. We route that and make sure that gets, reviewed by the appropriate VA stakeholder. So the goal there is to hopefully streamline that process of partnering with organizations external to VHA so that we can do the best that we can for veteran care. We want to give a clear pathway to vendors and to innovators in academia and private sector and nonprofits, et cetera. And then also, this is a tool that we use for VA employees, so that they can remain in the know on what's going on with VA. It allows them to sign up potentially, if they are a subject matter expert, they can be a reviewer of submissions that come in, et cetera. So it's our way of kind of bringing all these different stakeholder groups together in hopes that we can really streamline the process and make it easier for everyone to be involved there. Next slide, please. Okay, I think this is more or less what I just mentioned, right? So there's educational information on there. Again, companies, academia, et cetera, can submit information, whether it's selling or they want to innovate with VA. And then, that will route to the appropriate VA stakeholder for review there. Next. I think that might be it for me. Yeah, that's all I have. I think we'll have time at the end for questions, but really appreciate your time. And let's get to the RVH Veteran Segmentation Report.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So everyone, as we were building Pathfinder and wanting to create a mechanism, right, to those more porous boundaries, which is really a calling card of innovative, forward-thinking organizations, right? They invite a lot of engagement from folks inside and outside. As sort of the director of design within the ecosystem, my team has done a lot of qualitative research, a lot of human-centered design research, and really we've published a lot related to, what are the pervasive opportunities? What are we hearing from veterans? What are we hearing from employees? What are we hearing from, other stakeholders around the areas of opportunities that are important to them? So I had wanted us to publish all that we could on Pathfinder, so others who want to help us solve problems have access to all of that data. So here I'm going to talk about the Veteran Segmentation Report. I'm calling it a use case because it is but one use case. There's a lot on there in our resource library. But first, before we get into it, let's talk about what is reimagining veteran healthcare. So RVH is where we have leveraged the pandemic as an inflection point, right? As it was happening, a lot of things changed very quickly, inequitably for a lot of people. And my team, a group of ethnographers, human-centered design researchers, set out to understand the impacts of the pandemic as it was occurring, before everything sort of, went back to normal, as it kind of feels like it has. I think a lot of lessons have been, anyhow, I'll get off my soapbox. We have an RVH YouTube playlist. There's 3 short videos. I encourage you to go take a look at them so you get a better sort of understanding about what this is about and what we found. So the Veteran Segmentation Report is one document that we've released, and we did it at the very beginning, right? Before we go out to do our discovery and our ethnography, we had to do a lot of desktop research to understand, before we look into what the VA of the future can look like, we wanted to know, what do veterans of the future look like? So the segmentation report is basically demographics research from a lot of different data sources. I'm not going to talk about them because you can go into the report and you can see them in the appendix itself. But essentially, our research found that the overall veteran population is projected to decline over the next 25 years. It is also going to become more female. It's going to become more racially and ethnically diverse. It's going to become queerer, and they're going to become younger. And those are massive shifts that VA needs to be paying attention to right now to start to design solutions, opportunities, programs to meet the needs of changing veteran demographics. So I'm just going to run through a bit of the research. This is like a multiple, I don't even remember how many pages this report is. I'm just giving you a tiny little snippet. So here is essentially, right, the shifts of the veteran population, what it looks like now, or in 2021 when we published the research, and what it might look like in 2046. We looked into 8 specific sort of spotlighted demographics, because we wanted to look at these specific populations. There's some rationale behind each of them. And then at the end, we do talk about intersectionality, right? It's important to note that, right, a queer person who is also a person of color who might be experiencing homelessness has very different context than maybe a white housed upper middle class queer person. So obviously intersectionality is a huge piece here, but we really wanted to look at these 8 specific sort of demographics. And what I'm going to cover is just the key takeaways from each of those 8. So the key takeaways looking at sex and gender was, right, the overall number of female veterans is increasing. We need to be looking at that. The overall participation of women in the military, and of course, thus VHA, is also increasing. And that women veterans are enrolling in VA services at similar rate to males, but their trust scores are lower. So that's really something we have to be looking at. There's a lot more in the report itself that talks about the implications for research to help. It helped guide us in the work that we did in the years since. So these are all things that I want you all to be aware of, to pull into the work that you're doing, because they're massive implications for stuff that you're looking at as well. Race and ethnicity, some of the key takeaways, right? Veteran population will become much more diverse in the next 25 years. Some segments, such as Black veterans, enroll and use VHA services at a greater rate than white veterans. There could be lots of different reasons for that. And then, of course, the pandemic has highlighted persistent health inequalities in Black and Indigenous persons of color communities. So a bit about the shifting race and ethnicity as well. Lots of research questions that we came up with. Related to age in the future, the overall age spread of the veteran population will even out. So it's really interesting to look at sort of where we are today and what that might look like in 25 years. We also found that trust in VHA and use of its services varies by age, and that middle-aged veterans use services more frequently, but older veterans have more trust in VHA. So interesting tidbits there. And then, of course, the health needs and care delivery preferences of younger veterans will differ due to their age or of service and cultural expectations moving forward. And the organization really hasn't been doing a super great job in understanding that and really tailoring solutions to those differing preferences. Related to location, we found that rural areas have a higher proportion of enrolled veterans, that the rural veterans who are enrolled in VHA are older and are using urgent care services more than urban veterans, which has really interesting implications on the research. And that rural veterans face unique challenges and risks to a degree that urban veterans do not. So this allowed us to actually specifically target rural veterans in some of the pilot programs that we're running right now. Again, this research was done back in 2021, so we've done some things since we found this. And then when it comes to LGBTQIA+ veterans, we found that they comprise a larger share of the military when compared to the general population. We also found that the general population in the U.S. is identifying more as There are more individuals in Generation Z, almost double, that identify as LGBTQIA+ than that of the millennials, which is almost triple than that of Generation Z. So right as we go through time and as, you know, there's shifting sentiments related to these various identities, more people are identifying as queer, and VA really needs to be looking at creating solutions that are, you know, competent and confident to meet those shifting health needs. And then disability status, we found a bunch here related to, you know, veterans are receiving higher service-connected disability ratings, making them eligible and in need of more support from VHA. This is for lots of various reasons. The likelihood of service-connected veterans seeking VA healthcare generally increases with the veteran's disability rating. And TBI, PTSD, and other mental illnesses are prevalent among veterans, especially post 9/11 veterans. I think none of this is as much of a surprise, but we certainly need to be looking into disability status as well. And then homelessness, you know, back in 2021, some of this has shifted a little bit, but the pandemic really changed a lot related to temporary housing for people who are experiencing homelessness. And we found that while VA has made great strides, there are still many veterans who experience homelessness, especially male veterans, Black veterans, and those who are in California, Florida, Texas, and Washington. We also found that some prior efforts to aid veterans experiencing homelessness have been very successful when this population can be reached, but it can be really tough to engage them, which may not be as much of a surprise. And a bit more about that demographics snapshot. And then caregivers and families. So the pandemic certainly put a spotlight on the caregiving burden for all sorts of people, caregivers, people who are taking care of veterans, maybe veterans who have a caregiving responsibility along with their, you know, jobs, VA employees as well. So we really wanted to look at understanding the greater context of a veteran in their family unit. So we found that, you know, caregivers and families of veterans are often forced to seek support elsewhere and separated from their veterans' care because VA is typically unable to treat them. We found a lot related to vets who declined going to VA because they wanted to be able to have their family on the same insurance plan, which makes a lot of sense. So lots of interesting implications for future considerations of VA care. And then we also found that caregivers to veterans, particularly those post 9/11 veterans, must care for their veterans for decades and face higher likelihood of depression and really, really could use some more support. As I mentioned, a note regarding intersectionality, we also touched upon a bit of this, but this is by no means exhaustive here, but it really is important to note that even, you know, one unique identity is not a monolith in and of its own. There's a lot of complexity related to various intersectional identities, fluidity of identification as well. So just needed to make those connections for everyone. As I mentioned, we researched this report back in 2021. So I just wanted to touch upon what have we done since then. We leveraged this research to inform sort of who we wanted to target with our ethnography. So we specifically had a focus on the underserved, the unengaged, and the disengaged. We gave priority to veterans of color, women veterans, and LGBTQIA+ veterans, and rural veterans. In the ethnography that we did, we went out to people's homes. We sat on their front porches in their backyards, interviewing them to really get a good understanding of, you know, who they are and where they're coming from. And from that, we co-designed a portfolio of 11 solution concepts that are really like, this is what we heard that people want moving forward. And here are some potential ways that we can get there. And we are actively piloting one we call Care Cadre. It's actually a social support program targeting loneliness and isolation for veterans in rural areas. We've been running this pilot since mid-December of 2022, and we've learned a lot. We still have a lot more to learn. I can't share any of that out with you all just yet. But then the Surgeon General just released, you know, his report on the impacts of, you know, social disconnection. And we were like, yeah, yep, we heard this too. And we're actively doing stuff about it. We're about to add a second pilot site because in a completely different geography with a specific focus on minority veterans. The veteran demographics of the current population skew to elderly, straight, white men. I mean, they're in northern Minnesota, so I mean, you can kind of assume that to be the case. So we're going to be targeting minority veterans specifically with the second intervention. So while we continue our work internally to try to figure this out, we need a business case, we need there's a lot of stuff that we have to learn before this can be considered a viable solution for a VA. We want you to use our work to benefit your own, and I've made these curiosities and findings available to the public, to academia, to all of you, such as this veteran segmentation report. There's also the VA Leaders Insight report. If you want to hear what VA leaders had to say about the future of VA, you can see that. Our Veteran In-Flight Insights report. So after we did all that, we went out and we met with veterans. You can take a look at that. What frontline employees were saying. We also published 2 design artifacts, veteran archetypes and the phases of veteran life, which are really sort of representational of the veterans that we met with and just sort of a collective gathering of their stories and their needs and their wants. And I think that just about wraps it up. Oh, good. We are basically on time. I wanted us to stop talking at 1:40-ish so we could have a conversation. So what questions do you guys have?
So I will help moderate, but I'm also, maybe I'll take the first stab at a question for you. First of all, thank you very much. It's not only just fantastic work and data that you're providing, it's really exciting to know that people do this work inside the VA. I don't think a lot of people realize that there's an organization that's attempting to innovate inside a very large and lumbering bureaucracy, right? And it's slow, I'm sure. So my question really revolves around the veteran segmentation analysis and that 2046 number that you're driving at, and you know that our veteran population will be more female, younger, more diverse, more queer. So you have started to try to solve a couple of, or create innovations around a couple of those things, but that's a massive shift. It's almost like you need to have a whole separate VA stand up while the other one stands down. Is the work that you're doing in rural areas, are those little tweaks on the margins enough, or is there space for the deputy undersecretary to be like, we need to build something totally new?
Yeah.
How's that going inside the organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll be clear. So the pilots that we've done, so that was a basis of our research back in 2021. We wanted to find this out, and that would help us sort of identify who to talk to. We can't boil that ocean. There's so much change that could and needs to occur. And there are areas of the organization that are testing novel sort of care pathways. In my mind, a lot of it, there's a big functional piece and sort of like what's the word that I'm looking for? Some of it is function. A lot of it really kind of comes down to culture. And that, in my mind, is going to be the biggest battle that we're going to have. And the ways that we're sort of combating that and trying to create the culture that allows us to sort of step outside of the pervasive brick and mortar healthcare system mentality of today, to sort of liberate people's thinking for the future, is around having these conversations. The veteran segmentation report has been getting a lot of interest in the past 4 months specifically, which I find to be fascinating and really energizing, honestly, because we published the thing and then we kept moving. We're doing our work, and the fact that people are standing up and paying attention to it now is really exciting to me, and is one of the ways that I think we sort of get there. I don't know if standing up something completely separate is the way that we actually change VA. I think the way that we do it is the way that we do it within the ecosystem, where we build programs and ideas that are separate from yet informed by the current sort of core business. So that's what we're doing with the Care Cadre pilot. There's a lot of things that are not fully integrated into current clinical operations, which is done intentionally because we want to find, right, the value proposition. Is it feasible? Is it viable? Is it desirable? And then if we hit that sweet spot, then we're going to do the integration work. But also there are times that we build these things and they're not fully integrated into the operational settings of our clinical context or our administrative context. And when we start to do that integration, we actually can change what the current known is. So we do a little bit of what you're talking about, Jim, where we build these things in isolation, sort of, right? They're set aside. And sometimes we'll integrate them in and they'll just sort of plug right in. And sometimes we'll start to integrate. And then we can leverage it within the Innovators Network. We teach a philosophy known as the 3-box solution. I don't know if you guys have heard of Vijay Govindarajan. He's at Tuck School of Business down the road at Dartmouth. I'm in Vermont. And he really talks about, right, leveraging the past, present, and future, creation, destruction, and preservation in balance to continuously create the future. And that is what we do. So sometimes when we do our box 3 sort of build out of an innovation that can't currently coexist in the current business model, we get to then play around in what he calls box 2, which is the past. So we get to forget some stuff. We get to selectively abandon and divest from things that are no longer useful. It's a lot harder than than I wish it was. I love getting rid of things. I'm a little bit of a minimalist, but the organization as a whole tends not to be, which is a long-winded way of saying, I don't know. And we do that a little bit, but there's a lot of work that can be done still.
It's tough. I mean, I sometimes I think about bureaucratic change and massive organizations, kind of like urban planning. You're stuck with the sewers from 100 years ago, unless you're willing to take down an entire building or a block. And the disruption to do that requires a lot of storytelling to tell people it's worth it.
Yep.
And often it's not worth it. And so you have to just like figure out how you can innovate and put a liner in the sewer instead or something. I'm beyond my scope now, but that's kind of where we're at.
No, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Right. Or like those cities, right? So there's so many cities that have just such infrastructure issues that there's those areas that are just like, you know what, we're going to take this big stretch of land where there's nothing and we're just going to make a brand new city. And you're not beholden to the past. You can start from scratch. It would be fascinating to see.
It'd be great to do that, but I don't
build
think
a new city. Yep,
yeah.
It sure would. It sure would.
All right, let me pass the buck. Who's got a question? Raise your hand or just pop in. Come on, somebody.
Well, I guess I'll ask a question of you all. What are you working on right now? What are you getting curious about? And we can point you directly towards some references that we might have, if any, to help you in, your curiosities.
Well, I know a few people on here, and I know generally what they're working on, but I won't speak for them. Mayor or John?
I will say something. I'm definitely working to increase advocacy and information about LGBTQ veterans in particular. And I read in your report, the 2021 report that the VA isn't collecting data or didn't or isn't is my question. They didn't or aren't collecting data about those that identify in that community. Is that something that will change, is changing? You had statistics there about, healthcare providers feel this way or blah, 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 but we don't know exactly from those people. So I'm just curious if that measure is, or that demographic information is being collected now or will be in the future.
Yeah, Marianne, it's a great question. So the VA is starting to and I say starting to, I have to go back and check to see if they've actually like flipped the switch. But President Biden's executive order, he's issued a couple of different executive orders, but one, relates to better supporting, diverse populations across the federal government. And so the VA has, as of last year, maybe the year before, this sort of like inclusion, diversity, equity, and access task force that has been looking at a lot of these types of things. And it is my understanding that they've actually started to build a strategy around data sources where we are collecting the stuff within the healthcare context, also within the employment context, because there's also a huge sort of blind spot around supporting, queer employees as well. And then looking at other sort of factors. So there is work ongoing. I'm not sure if they flipped that switch yet and if it's been integrated, but there's also a big piece around, so we can ask for the data, but around like the comfort levels around people feeling like, can I disclose this? I was at VBA, their Office of OTED, what are they? Office of Transition and Economic Development, asked me to actually bring the LGBTQIA stuff from the Veteran Demographics Report to their Pride kickoff event yesterday, when they were talking to queer vets who are now just looking at benefits. And we've got like folks who are requesting discharge upgrades from, being kicked out under like the lavender scare, right? So talk about deep trauma that, it's really hard to combat. So, right, we need to get the data piece there, but we also need to build that trust piece and those bridges and coalitions. And for communities who have been, who are so vulnerable and who have been so traumatized, it takes a lot.
Dale writes in the chat that he's currently interested in research device and medical device creation for unmet needs.
Yeah, so we actually have a collaboration under the Innovators Network known as the Greenhouse. And the Greenhouse Initiative actually provides early stage innovators and entrepreneurs, and some include sort of early stage medical devices to pitch their idea, their prototype, it has to be super early stage, to a group of innovation specialists in order to obtain sort of partnership with clinical context. So Dale, we might drop in the Greenhouse stuff because I don't know if they've got anything sort of published on there, but we've got some early stage work happening in that area as well. And the Innovators Network is actually a couple of VA employees through the Innovators Network Spark Seed Spread Innovation Investment Program have built devices and gotten patents, have licensed their ideas externally. It's fantastic. I'll find the link, Dale, and I'll drop it in the chat for you.
Brynn or Matt, is there a complementary organization inside VBA or in the cemeteries administration, or is this really a healthcare focused and they just don't have either the space or the depth to do such a thing?
Yeah, the precursor to the innovation ecosystem was the VA Center for Innovation. So VACI existed at like the VA enterprise level and was attempting to build those coalitions within VHA, NCA, and VBA. And they found that the bulk of the uptake and interest was at VHA. So that's sort of why we are, VEO, the Veterans Experience Office, they do generally sort of early design work and discovery across all of the VA portfolios. So the Veterans Experience Office, really looking through the lens of veteran experience, hits all of them. But within VHA, we do the employee-driven grassroots innovation because, we're the biggest of the bunch.
I got one more just mentioned in the chat, which you're not looking at, but I got. So Peter mentions that he's working on music and music therapy to address the effects of PTSD. And then as many of us who've worked in higher education are talking about the effects of the effects of service in higher ed. Some of that's PTSD, some of that's identity work, some of that's also like, how does that affect your progress in higher ed? Anyone else?
I just wanted to chime in. So Peter, the marketplace, and I uploaded the deck into the chat. So if you guys don't want to lose it, download it. Jim, you can share it out with your group. The marketplace, Peter, I think has some music therapy based projects in it. So if you want to query that and see what's going on, I definitely recommend that.
Well, like a good government organization, we started on time and we ended like right on time. Well done. Thank you very much, Matt and Brynn, for your presentation, for your information that you provided, for your work. We're really excited to have learned about it, and I'm on the mailing list, so I get to see the good stuff that's happening and bring it into my class all the time. So as we wrap up, let me just remind you, we are going to have a conference. There's a call out there. Mayor posted the call. If you're interested, look at it. Even if you're not interested, look at it and then figure out if you're interested, right? Lots of great opportunities to share your work, your advocacy in this space with your people, which is us. The other thing I want to mention is that these, the last 4 of these presentations we've been doing, we've saved, and they're now posted on our website at veteranology.org. You can get there through veteranology.org. It's actually a YouTube site. Don't ask me the details behind how that happens, but it does happen. And this one, once we get it cleaned up, will also be posted for your review along with the slide deck. With that, thank you very much, everybody. We will see you in not next month, maybe in the month after that with the next series. So keep your eye on your email and have a great summer. Thanks, Brynn. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Take care.